Yes, we want to talk about feedback and holistic scoring and its role in creating the growth mindset. So a lot of the things I will share comes out of experience as well as out of my personal research with my students, as well as the research that I've conducted in terms of publications. So let me see if I can get this to work. There we go. So session highlights. We want to explore our feedback principles and the self-efficacy things that are influenced with this growth mindset idea. And we want to look at holistic assessment opportunities. Hopefully you're going to leave today with a set of principles. I narrowed them down to fit in this session, some practical feedback strategies and some holistic scoring methods that you can take to your courses right away. So let's start by talking about the actual culture we're trying to build. Students' approaches to learning via a growth mindset increases achievement. This is what Dweck has put out there for years now and has found that this growth mindset is what actually can improve achievement. And we all tend to know that because in our philosophy of teaching, we often say we want students to become lifelong learners. Well, what does that mean? That means that they have to have a growth mindset and that learning isn't a fixed point in time and then I forget it. That what we're teaching them, I think most of us would say we want them to carry with them on further into additional study, as well as into their careers and in their lives. So for success in the workplace, we want to assist them in developing that growth mindset, in addition to the content that we teach them within our courses. But we also want to help them increase their self-efficacy. And this can be done through targeted feedback and holistic assessment strategies. So quickly, let's talk about our principles. First of all, one, you have to be intentional. So whatever it is that we're trying to teach students, we need to be intentional about it. We can't feedback everything. We cannot teach everything. So it's really important that we focus on specifically what we want to accomplish within a course that's outside the content in order to build a growth mindset. So for example, in a number of my courses, I want students to develop critical reading and thinking skills. I want information literacy to be a part of that course. Some courses are based on evidence-based decision-making, or they need to learn to identify scholarly and trustworthy sources. You don't want to do everything, but whatever you choose that you want students to develop in those soft skills and to grow, you want to be very intentional. And those are the things you want to focus your feedback on, because that's what will help to support not only that culture and that mindset, but also support the skills you're trying to build. Second principle, we want to assess for growth. If you're not assessing for growth, it's difficult to develop a growth mindset in your students. And so I'm going to try very hard not to step on toes, but if you happen to be an instructor who only gives a midterm and a final within a course structure, you're not sending the message to the student that they should be growing over time. The message you're sending is there's a fixed point in time when you should know everything. So at the midpoint, you should know everything, or at the end. So something to think about, just consider it. I know lots of folks have reasons for why they do things, but I wanted to share that in order to build the growth mindset, the real kick and key is whether or not you assess for growth. So some examples of how that can happen: allowing resubmissions is one of those ways, and we'll talk further about that. Peer review opportunities are huge, so you gotta love FeedbackFruits for that. I've used the FeedbackFruits peer review tools, and I have found them to be super successful in helping students to give each other feedback. Using holistic scoring methods, we'll talk more about that. Developing tasks or components over time, using growth-infused feedback. These are strategies that we can use for assessing for growth. And then the final principle is we want to think long-term. So we need to think about what we're trying to build across the entire course from beginning to end. We want to develop those progressively, and we do this by showing students that they will grow. We expect them to grow. And so the latter assignments, whatever those are, whether they're low stakes or high stakes, are actually weighted more within the course. So there's the 3 principles we're going to work from. Let's talk about some practical feedback strategies. We want to give growth-infused feedback. And this is difficult. This is something that I continue to grow and develop. I am not a master of this just yet. I try really hard, but I do believe that I grow each year in my ability to do this. And the way I do this is to try to focus on positivity as opposed to what a student did not do correctly. I focus on what a student can do next time or to revise what they're currently doing. And so I use lots of positive terms and I leave things open for students to interpret what they can do or how to direct themselves so that they take responsibility. So for example, I use things like, try this, try going back to the instructions and highlighting the keywords in the instructions I gave, or you might start by trying this, or let's do this. Let me encourage you to consider an alternative path, or whatever that looks like in your particular content area. You also want to be sure that your growth-infused feedback is for students that get things right, as well as things that are lacking. So here are some examples. You wrote detailed reasons for. Students need to know what they've done right, not just that they've done it right. So if they get a grade of an A, they need to know what part of their project, was done correctly so that they can replicate that in the future. In a case of, hey, you define the topic, however, you need to provide some examples. So in this case, I'm giving positivity to what they did correct, but then how they can improve this particular assignment. You gave examples that accurately explained XYZ. Best to avoid pronouns without reference. This is something that I probably say on a daily basis to students because this is a very common error that I find. Lots of students love pronouns. And it's very difficult to follow if they do not have a referent within the sentence. So the next practical feedback strategies would be to encourage peer review on those formative and low-stakes assessments. I do tons of these. And if I could encourage you, one thing in terms of assessment is to add lots and lots of formative assessments that can be done through discussion posts, or I use colleague-to-colleague videos, and this has been super successful. Basically, students do a self-video on the topic that we've been discussing for the week or whatever the module is, and then they post it on the discussion board and students watch each other's video, and I give a time limit. I say no more than 5 minutes. And so it's a short discussion, and then sometimes they'll post a video back to each other as a response, or sometimes they'll just discuss and they are to respond to each other with the ideas that they shared. It is a super fun way to do an alternative to a discussion board. And this gives students opportunity to give feedback to each other. And as some of my students have told me, they actually prepare more to do a peer review session, something that's peer reviewed, like a discussion board or a colleague-to-colleague video, as opposed to how much effort they put into an assignment for me, which I have found to be extremely interesting. But it helps to build that growth mindset and that they're doing it together. So that's a great feedback strategy to use. They give each other feedback quite a lot on those particular activities. I also do feedback from the front, is what I call it. It's pre-feedback. Basically, I draw attention to what it is that I want them to focus on within a particular assignment. And I do that through the instructions. Sometimes I do it through a variety of tasks that are leading to it, or I post on a weekly announcement. Hey, we're doing this week. Focus your attention on, or I use something like an infographic. These are ways to do things from the front. So I give a lot of feedback from the front that I have found to be super successful in helping students. So let's shift over into our mindset of holistic scoring, because that's one of the strategies that we're going to use in order to build a growth mindset. Is you need to have a grading policy that shows growth. So here's the thing. In holistic scoring, growth is the key term. Okay, we want to develop students into growing. And to do that, the course grade must represent the highest performance level that the student obtained rather than the grades that are taken at fixed points in the term. So think about that, for example, for instance. So as you are doing grading across the course, the student should be improving along the way, and the final grade should be representative of where they are at the end of the learning cycle, at the end of the course, rather than their grade is representative of an average of these snippets of time taken across the course, whether it's a midterm and a final, whether it's 10 quizzes, or however your, a paper at the beginning, a paper at the end. Often what we find is that when we use these fixed points across a semester, we get to the end and we go, that's not really the grades that students should be receiving at the end. And so we do things like dropping the lowest quiz grade or dropping a test grade, or we give students opportunity for extra credit, or whatever those different things look like, curving grades and such. Those things come into play because we realize that the grade at the end is not quite representative. So I would encourage you to think through your grading process to see how you can build in a more holistic approach to grading, and that final grade absolutely represents the highest performance level the student achieved. So let me give you some strategies. So first, this one I use all the time. So the strategy is using words instead of numbers. Most learning management systems will allow you to put in a word. Blackboard does, absolutely, because I use Blackboard and I can put in a word. So discussion posts, colleague-to-colleague videos, a variety of small tasks along the way, whatever those assignments are, I can put in words. So all the low-stakes assessments, I put in words. I simply put needs an intervention, developing, proficient, exemplary. Most students come in the course needing intervention or developing. Sometimes they come in the course proficient, but rarely. But by the end, I have found that my students are proficient or exemplary. They learn from each other on the discussion boards in these low stakes assessments. They often are trying to chase one of the highest achievers that they consider one of the highest achievers. And so I simply have to put in the first set of words, and then I just change the word as the student has met the next level. I also have some very detailed rubrics for students to see, and I use that detailed rubric in order to determine if a student has now moved to the next level. My scoring in terms of my time to do this has decreased considerably, and my students' achievement has increased considerably. In my syllabus, this is what I put. Assessment scores are calculated as an average of the rated criteria. The criteria rated as follows. And I put in here my scoring rating. Now, this shifts every so often because I change my mind about what proficient means. Sometimes I think proficient means A-. Sometimes I feel like it's a solid B. In this particular case, I have A, B, C, D. So this way, students can see what their word actually means in terms of a number grade. I would put this score into the grade book at the very end of the term because it is representative of what they achieved by the end. So if they are now doing exemplary posts on the discussion boards or exemplary colleague-to-colleague videos, then 100% will be entered into the grade book. Okay, the next strategy, scoring over time. I can't encourage you to do this anymore. Scoring components that build to a final project will show students that they are building and growing across time. They will also learn at a deeper level when they are working with materials over and over and over again. Allowing resubmissions. This shows students that you expect and welcome them to grow. Now, I often get the question, what if I have 200 people in class? I can't rescore everything. Well, you have to understand, just by putting this into your syllabus and into the culture of your class, the student is building the culture or understands the culture is growth. Not every student will take you up on it. I have not found, and colleagues that I work with have not found in these very large classes, more than 10% of the people ever take them up on a rescore. And so at a cost of 200, you might rescore, say, 20 people, but those 20 people would have had an opportunity to grow. Sometimes it's the perception of growth. So even if a student doesn't take you up on it, they are perceiving that they have opportunity to grow. What students have told me is it was comforting and it was encouraging to their own self-efficacy to know they didn't have to be perfect out of the gate, that there would be opportunity to improve, to revise, and to change if they needed it. It was almost like an extra net to catch them in case they fell. I also use this opportunity times where I tell students that in their feedback, I might say, you know, it appears as though you missed some key elements in the assignment, or you missed the point of the assignment, and I suggest that you resubmit. Please do this, and I give them some suggestions on how to improve and to refocus them on the particular assignment. Sometimes students just completely miss the mark. And so there are times where I actually tell students, hey, please resubmit this. And then finally, we want to use growth-oriented rubrics. Now, this is just one line out of one of my rubrics, but as you can see, and I do mine backwards because I believe people read left to right, at least in America we do. Left to right, and I want them to see the highest thing I'm wanting them to obtain. So I have that first. But as you can see, if you look from needs, intervention to exemplary, at each stage, there should be another level of expectation. And so I show through this rubric that they should grow. Notice that this is key and specific to what I'm expecting from the assignment. I'm expecting them to give background, pertinent details, contextualize their paper. I'm expecting that summary to bring closure and to give value to a topic. That's what, that's the highest over above expectation. So I'm not putting on here, I want 4 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs, 1 paragraph, or they should use 5 sources, 4 sources, 3 sources. It's not the amount as it is the quality. And that's the difference between a true growth-oriented type of rubric. So here's just very quickly, I know I think I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to talk fast. Here's just a quick assignment transformation. Discussion post to discussion post. My old discussion post said, what's meant by the terms scholarship and rigor? Basic low-level question. I tell them to give me 150 to 200 words, and I tell you how it's scored. Do you know how much effort it took for me to score every discussion post? It was insane. It was more than grading a 10-page paper. So when I began to really work through this idea of holistic scoring, I changed. Now my discussion posts look like this. Explain the concepts of scholarship and rigor and how they apply to the educational leader. Discuss your experiences and respond to your classmates. And so in the syllabus, it says these are graded holistically on the level of performance from needs intervention to exemplary. They're progressive in nature, intended to develop you as a thinker and a writer as you progress through the course. The final level of performance you obtain is entered into the gradebook. So I tell them right out the gate, I'm expecting them to grow. And so that's one example of how I transformed one of my assignments. Okay, so benefits. You'll get growth-oriented students using holistic scoring methods and feedback that is geared toward developing that growth mindset. You will minimize grade-centric attitudes. It has been a very, very long time since I have had a student walk into my class and say, I expect to get an A, which I had in the past. My students are now more focused on improving themselves, on growing. It increases their self-efficacy, and I have lots of data to back that up and did publish about that as well. And you will get self-responsible students, because students will then take over the responsibility of getting the A. It's not so much dependent upon you, because you're the one that gives it to them when you have these very fixed points in the semester, as opposed to, hey, you're going to learn, you're going to grow, but that growth is up to you. I'll help you get there. It's your job to do the work to get there. And so all of these are great benefits. Thanks for joining me. Again, I'm at Fort Hays State University. If you look at a map, actually, we're not very far from the dead center middle of the contiguous United States. But I also wanted to say a quick plug for the Academic Leadership Journal and Student Research. If you do research with your students, this journal is geared toward that intersection between faculty and students in doing fabulous research projects. So feel free to have your students submit. Would love to see their work. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was wonderful. The chat was very engaged. So I think there's a couple questions. If you can summarize in maybe 2 sentences, because we are running on time, so we're right there. But there was a question from Ashish. He mentions that we are having a community in the LMS, but the students hesitate to participate. How can I encourage students to participate for peer review in an online training program?
Encourage them to peer review an online training program. Encouragement often comes with, there is a grade for this. So I have students submit papers for the automated feedback that system within FeedbackFruits. And it's a requirement. I will not open up the submission for the paper for them. It does not open for them to actually submit their paper unless it has gone through that automated feedback. I do the same thing with peer review. So they do get a level of point structure. And the way I do that is I have them give each other feedback, and their job is to submit to me the 3 things they learned from their partner during that feedback event, whatever that was. And then I have built that into the scoring. Students will do things that are of value to them. So sometimes you have to help them to see that peer review is really valuable. And so early in the semester, I will find that it takes a little bit more nudging to get that to happen, and by putting in those grades. Sorry, that was way more than 2 sentences. But hopefully that helped to answer the question.